Having an exceptional relationship with your spouse affects every single aspect of your life and is crucial for experiencing your dream life together. I'm Rob Murgatroyd.
And I'm Kim Murgatroyd. Listen in on our honest, filter-free conversations as we navigate life and business together without killing each other.
You'll learn by osmosis how to transform the friction you feel in your relationship into a purposeful foundation that will allow you to grow together.
Welcome to the Friday Podcast.
Kimberly, midnight train to Georgia. How are you this morning?
Midnight train to Georgia.
She's leaving.
Oh my God. No one tuned in for this.
Give me the backup. I'll start again. She's leaving.
On the midnight train to Georgia.
She's leaving on the midnight train. Woo, woo.
Okay.
Guess what we're talking about?
What are we talking about?
Backup dancers is what we're talking about today. And why am I talking about backup dancers, you ask? Well, the reason why I'm talking about backup dancers is because I'm not a very good number two, is what I've learned. So let me give you the lens in which to understand this backup dancer number one, number two conversation as it relates to
Friday.
Couples, but not necessarily even couples. So let me take you back to Mykonos. We were in Mykonos with our friend Darren and his wife Tony, and we were just having a conversation about life or whatever. And when it comes to travel and doing things, I can be a little in the pushy category.
Oh,
in
really?
My way or the highway. But listen, I turned it into a business. It's provided a lot of nice trips and nice living for our family. So, I'm good at it. So the point...
You like to take charge, is what you're saying.
The point is, in that area, it is something I like to take charge.
So you're number one. You're the lead singer of travel.
I'm the lead singer of travel, and thank God it's travel and not singing.
Have you seen that meme where the guy is like, it's like a guy at the computer and he's typing away and it says something like, point of view, I'm creating our next family trip, booking the hotels, booking the restaurants. And then it's like a penguin shows up, or a kid shows up just walking on the flight with no cares in the world. That's me.
Right. So the guy is all in on, creating the most incredible trip for his family. And then in this case, the wife just shows up and waddles in, right? So
waddles, not because it's the wife. Waddles because in this meme, it was a small child.
Thank you for correcting.
Yeah, I just don't want...
It was a waddling 2-year-old. So Darren's wife, Tony, said to me, "You're pretty much the only one he does this with." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "He is such an alpha, such a number one dog that, when he runs a big company, and when he runs his company, he just, comes into the room, dominates the room like most CEO people do." What's the word I'm looking for? Not control freaks. What's the word? Leaders.
It was pretty funny.
It's so funny how they just came out.
Not control freaks.
What do they call the not control freak leader? Oh, yeah. Okay. Right. Patton. And I said, "What do you mean?" And then Darren heard it, and he said, "Sometimes you have to know when to be a good number two." And I said, "What do you mean by a good number two?" He said, "A good number two is when you say, this isn't my lane, this isn't my department, or you've made a decision that it's not your lane. Maybe you could do it, but you made a decision that you're not going to do it. Then you have to let somebody step up to the plate to be the number one, right? Well, what does that mean? That means that you're then
You're the backup dancer.
By de facto, you're number two, i.e. the backup dancer. And that was a long-winded way of entering the conversation of the backup dancer. So we thought that this would be a good topic to discuss because in a relationship, there are times when those roles get switched and one becomes the primary and one becomes the backup dancer, right? One's the lead dog and one's the...
I think it should switch, but I'm going to let you in on how we come up with our topics. We watch our friends and people around us fuck up things in their relationship, and then I go, oh, we should talk about that on the show. So we have some friends that are amazing people, and they both want to be lead singer all the time, if that makes sense. They both want to be number one all the time in everything. And what does that do? That creates a lot of friction and conflict that is visible to the outside world because they both want to step up and be the lead singer all the damn time. And no one knows when to be a backup dancer. And Rob and I noticed this after, a few times hanging out. And we started having the conversation about how in our relationship, we kind of know when to toggle in and out of being the lead singer and the backup dancer.
Yeah. When you're a couple, you are going through things in life together. You are having experiences together. So if I'm at a dinner and I'll say something like, this time we were in Paris and I asked somebody if they know where I can get a crepe. Now, Kim can go in and immediately fill in every detail of the story because she's heard me tell that story 1,000 times. So if she wanted to, she can step all over me and she can say, and then what happened was, and sometimes she does. And then what happens is, and then all of the sail gets sucked out of my story because she just took it over because she wanted to be the lead dog. And the reverse is true for me too. So I think navigating those challenges, and I would categorize it as a challenge because these little, we've been using, I hate this word because it just seems so weird, but we've been using this word in this relationship world that we're sort of, in as it relates to Friday, conversations around relationships. This word of friction, right? It always I don't know, just maybe I'm just too sexual. There's something about the word. The word friction just feels so sexual to me. I don't know why.
If I said to you, it felt like a rub, is that better?
No, that would be right. It's exactly. I'm trying to find words that
annoyance.
Annoyance isn't sexual, but friction and rub just okay. Anyway, so what you're trying to avoid as much as you can is friction or to try to get more friction, one or the other.
Oh my God.
In relationships and things like this of deciding who's the lead dog and who isn't the lead dog, I think is something that requires I don't want to say constant monitoring, but a sense and an awareness of, because what happens is then you start moving into the every time, right? Then it becomes like, every time I tell a story, you finish it. Or every time I try and say something, you won't let me talk. And I think navigating those skills are a challenge because when it's just you two and you're having a conversation, you don't enter these areas of problems because I'm not going to tell her that crepe story because she's heard it 1,000 times. It's just not going to come up. But when you're with other people, and you begin to start doing things like that, it's very easy to unintentionally be disrespectful of the other person in front of other people in an effort to steal the limelight. And if your natures are, like we have a particular couple that we know where they're both extroverts, right? So when couples are both introverts, it's a challenge to be with them because it's like pulling teeth. And when couples are both extroverts, it's a challenge because they're both literally talking at the same time and they're frustrated with each other because the other one isn't able to make any sort of point because they're just so extroverted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, but it goes beyond that, right? So you have this, yes, when you're out with couples and being the lead dog and knowing when to be the lead singer versus the backup singer. But I think it crosses over into other areas of life, especially if you're working together in any capacity. And Rob and I, years ago, many, many years ago, we used to have massive fights over who's doing what. And we figured out who belongs in which lane and is better suited. So, for example, if there's anything that requires a phone call, I will put it on his list of things to do because I don't enjoy making phone calls to customer service. Just the whole process is not something I enjoy doing. And he somehow does. Like I walk in and Rob's on the phone with customer service and they're talking about, like he'll be sitting there having a full-on conversation about their favorite places to travel.
Oh, this just happened. You would have loved this. I was on the phone the other day. You asked me for my life insurance, you asked me to update the address. So I called the lady, and she said, do you have an APO? And I was like, what's an APO? She goes, well, if like, let's say my dad was in the embassy. This is the customer service person for the insurance
It's a
company.
government post office box.
Yeah, she's like, my dad was in the embassy. And I was like, oh, really? Where? And so we were talking for 25 minutes about what it was like for her growing up in Israel. She's in the States now working for the life insurance company.
Okay, this is a customer service call.
Right. And I do this a lot because I'm a people guy, right? So I like it. So this is not something that she likes.
It's not something in my wheelhouse. I want to get on, change my address, and move on. So anything related to the phone, I give to him to do. Anything that's like, you need to send me an email, he gives to me because he's not detail oriented, and he'll miss like 4 letters of the person's email address, and then the email will never get there.
Or not read the email that I'm responding to, and it's not the question that they asked.
Right. So we know where each other's lane is, but there are times, and there have been times, where we don't know where the first, lead, like if we're driving somewhere,
the lane's crossed and it hasn't been established who does what.
I'm a navigator in the car. That's just, I can't use the lady that talks to me because she tells me the wrong way to go.
The lady.
I can't use the lady in the car. She tells me the wrong way to go. I also happen to have an obsession with shortcuts. And so I like to be the navigator, and Rob knows that I'm the navigator and he drives. And that's just how we roll. Now, there are times where we have been in situations in work where I'm a strong alpha. Rob is a strong alpha in our own rights, but often he's like, can I talk?
We talk.
Can I talk?
I mean, we can't talk like we talk.
No, I want to talk to them, not you. Can you close
private group?
Can you close your ears?
By the way, let me just say this, okay? If you are not a member of our private group,
our premium community,
you're missing out.
It's like so good.
Like this shit. Like we can't.
The things we talk about.
We know people listening to this. Sometimes they have kids in the car, and you got to be a little sensitive. So, are
you ever really sensitive?
Yes, we'll curse. We will cross lines. We'll say sexual innuendos.
But nothing like in the private community.
But when we're in the private community,
but
it's
we have
like
different conversations there.
That it's not like OnlyFans. Like I'm not clipping my toenails for money in the community, which by the way is an OnlyFans thing.
Oh my God!
There's the guys making 100.
Okay, you're getting off. You're totally taking me off my.
I'm just telling them that it's a nice.
Our premium community.
They should.
There's a link in the bio, in the caption,
right,
or whatever.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I lost my train of thought. You do this all the time.
See.
So yes, there are times. Rob is, I'm going to say, he likes to be the Queen of England, okay? He's the Queen of England. I'm the Prime Minister.
Who doesn't want to be the Queen?
I want to be the Prime Minister. So if in our world, Rob is the Queen of England, he's the figurehead, and I get some shit done behind the scenes. That's not to negate that he doesn't get shit done. He does. But if you'd have to say... he's looking at. By the way, this is when we need a video podcast because the look I'm getting right now.
Let me tell you why I'm looking at you, because you so much buy into that load of shit that your daughter, what does your daughter say?
She doesn't think daddy works.
Yeah.
She thinks mommy works and does everything, and daddy just hangs out.
She thinks I have to ask.
Mommy for money.
Which is true, but I have to ask mommy for money because mommy is the one that works and daddy doesn't work.
Okay, so daddy's the Queen of England. He's the figurehead and mommy is the Prime Minister. That's our relationship, right? So Rob spends the majority of his time in his work doing front Queen of England stuff. Right. So he's
front-facing figurehead, heads
stuff.
Of state, shaking hands, kissing babies.
Right. And I am totally cool playing the backup dancer and things. But there was a moment, okay? And by the way, he's making this out like this is a bunch of bullshit. There was a moment where for the first time in the history of our relationship, I was the figurehead. I was the front dog. We were in our network marketing company. We were doing an event, and Rob has always been the lead dog, the front guy, the Queen of England, the figurehead. We're on stage, and what happened?
I can't remember.
Oh, all of a sudden you have amnesia?
I don't remember.
Okay. So
you keep telling this story. I don't think it's true anyway.
Okay. This is how Rob started the Work Hard, Play Hard podcast.
All right, let me tell the story, and then
Are you stealing the story, doing the thing you just did?
No, but I'm asking for permission, so it negates it.
Okay.
Give me a minute to take them up to. Let me give you.
Go for it.
Let me give you my perspective, and then we'll give you your perspective.
Go
All
ahead.
Right. So, we were in a network marketing company. We had we were on stage giving some talk for something, and we got to the Q&A portion of the talk. And they were lining up with microphones, with a microphone to ask questions. You know how that goes. And so the first question comes in. And they said, so Kim, when you are, and I was like, okay, that one's directed to Kim. And then the next one comes in and says, hi, Kim, when you are, and I went, okay, that one, okay, all right. So I'm just standing there. After 3, 4, or 5 of those questions, it was over. And I was like, holy shit, I have never felt more invisible in my life. It was like I was having an out-of-body experience, that I was on stage as like somebody holding a clipboard for her. There was no interest in what I had to say, me answering any questions or whatever. And I got off and I was like, what the fuck am I even doing here?
Okay, pause there. So then we went in the back and I had to go use the restroom. And I said, Rob, can you hold my purse? And I went to the restroom. And people started to come up to Rob, and he thought they were going to, because sometimes at these events, if you go in the back, you know, people will come outside to ask you more questions. And so people, do you remember this? And people started to come up to you while you were waiting for me to get out of the restroom. And you were like, hi, what's your name? How can I help you? And they said, I'm waiting for Kim.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Kim.
I wanted to ask him a question.
Yeah.
And so when I came out, there was a bunch of people wanting to ask me more questions, and there Rob is holding my purse. And so it was like insult to injury. But let me say this. This was the literal first time ever that I was the person that everybody wanted to talk to, and that the roles weren't reversed. Usually everyone comes up to Rob. It doesn't matter if we're at a party or if we're somewhere. In Atlanta, we lived in Atlanta almost 20 years. We went to the same restaurant every Thursday night. When I went in with Rob, it was like, oh, good evening, Murgatroyd. So good to see you. And I have your table. And like everyone, if I walked in by myself or with friends, have you been here before? I'm like, I've been coming here for 20 fucking years. And nobody recognized me. Darren has the same thing in Mykonos. We go to Mykonos and we walk into a restaurant every year. And they come over, they hug and kiss. And then the owner introduces himself to Darren every year. And he's like, it's nice to meet you. Is this your first time? Like, there is something about, I think it's the hair. I don't know, the personality, they help. But Rob is always the one that gets the attention, the conversation, that someone remembers. So the fact that this was the first time ever in the history, it made me feel good, right? So then we leave, and what happens? Do you recall?
Well, you and I wound up getting in a huge fight because I was so
ego bruised.
Yeah, ego bruised for sure. Insecure was the word that I was going to say. I had never been in a situation like that in my life, like never. Like I felt so fucking invisible that I was adding no value to this at all, that in the end, I have to say, they were right, because you were the one that was passionately leading the business, leading the team. Your strategic brain was able to understand the compensation plan of the company and be able to explain it in such a way that it gave somebody belief that they can accomplish the goals that they were after in life. And that wasn't at all what I was good at. And so it bubbled up at that moment on stage for the world to see that this was not something that I was shining at. This was not something that I was good at. And it was something that was so clear for me and it wasn't even a question for the other people. They didn't even have a question for me. But it was so clear to me that I was in a world that I was not providing value for. It was like there was no contribution or certainly little that I would. And, like if you're at a dinner and you're talking about it, maybe somebody will listen in. But when somebody is paying their money, trying to grow a business, sitting there listening to a talk, they're going to be very intentional about who they're asking questions to because they need to. They have 2 minutes with the person to ask a question. Well, in that moment, I realized that their 2 minutes was far better spent with you than it was with me. And it really made me go back and go, what am I doing? So first, there was this tremendous ego bruise, this tremendous what's wrong with me bruise. But what I didn't do is I didn't realize that this is something that you were going through regularly, and that in going through that, I was taking that limelight away. So there was a lot of things that were happening there at one time. One was my ego was bruised. 2 was this is something that you never get to. 3 was I was taking the limelight away from you, which was your moment you had worked so hard for that everybody was validating your level of effort and work that you were putting into this by coming to you saying, help me.
And you made it about you.
And I made it about me. Right.
So how would you fix that? Like, because we've never had that instance again. And there is a part, like, I do stay in the background. Like, here's another example. It's interesting because the work hard, play hard events that you do, I'm now very sensitive to not pushing myself into the center stage, right? So Rob started these work hard, play hard events, and where this all came out of, though, was this moment on stage. So we have this moment on stage. Rob has this ego bruise. We have this massive fight after, and Rob effectively picked up his ball and left. And he said, you know what? This is your thing now. It's obvious that I'm not providing value. I am going to go figure out my thing. And that led to him going back into podcasting because we had podcasted before, and eventually into the events. So I was very, very, very cautious of stepping into the limelight of those things because I wanted him to shine. I want him. It does not mean anything to me to have that. Does it feel good sometimes? Sure. But I'm not wired that way. Like when you do the love language test, I would assume, Rob, that for you, words of affirmation are probably much higher than it is for me.
It's number one.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm acts of service. And so your act of service of basically denying my words of affirmation.
Well, but okay, so listen, there's one of these moments, this is one of those moments where you look back and go, okay, this was completely 100% the universe making this happen for a multitude of reasons.
Absolutely.
There's like 10 solid changes that came out of that really shitty thing. And even though I was in the midst of it and felt embarrassed for the way I was behaving, but at the same time, I was right. I wasn't adding value there, and I needed to be doing something else that was adding value. And so
there was contrast creating clarity for you.
For sure, but like a lot of times you go to these events, right? And there are couples. And I'm just thinking about that event. And there's usually a lead dog especially in network marketing, especially there's usually one of them that's the lead dog and the other one is carrying the purse, right? And it might be the woman carrying the purse, and it might be the man carrying the woman's purse for her. And I mean that both metaphorically, but I also mean it literally in the sense that I was doing it as well. And I think that if you have an expectation that you're not the backup dancer and that you are the lead dog, and the other person actually is the lead dog, you're in trouble. And you're going to wind up in the situation that I was in. But if I found myself in that situation again, it would be if I was even on that stage, which there's like a 0% chance I'd put myself through that again. But let's just say that there was a scenario where they wanted the couple. I would clearly hold myself in the position of the supportive spouse and not the lead dog in the, like, my contribution would be, we're doing this together energetically, but it's Kim's thing. Like, I am here supporting her. I am rooting everything, and whatever question she has, or she wants to bounce an idea off me, or she has trouble with a particular client or a teammate, and how would I handle it? It would be a supportive role. So I would win Best Supporting Actress. See what I did there?
Best Supporting Actress. Oh my God, that is the truth. Okay, so what's the takeaway for you?
For me or for the listener?
No, for the listener and for you, for both of you.
See how I just make it right about me?
Right about you again.
Yeah.
So the first thing I think that is helpful in partnerships, relationships, marriage, is to define some roles of kind of who does what based on whose wheelhouse is it in more, and who enjoys doing it more, and divide it out, right? There are things that, the other thing we used to fight about is who managed the QuickBooks or the Quicken account, like who did the financials for our businesses and our family, and who was in charge of that. And there was a moment of, I took it over, and Rob QuickBooking over my shoulder, telling me what I was doing wrong. And I looked at him and I was like, dude, you can do it or I can do it, but we cannot do it like this. And so there's an element of figuring out who does what, who's going to play the lead in this area, who's going to play the backup dancer in this area, and being okay with that. And then there's the new things, right? And the things that end up blending. And this is what I was saying, like with the Work Hard, Play Hard events. We would go on these events. I was the backup dancer, 100%, did not want to be the lead dog. Rob led all the exercises. He did all the welcomes and all of everything we did. It was Rob's show. I was there to pay the bill when it came. I was there to make sure everyone was where they needed to be on time. I felt like a mother hen, right? Doing these events. I go around and I make sure all the little things are done. All the bags are in the rooms, all the things, everything that needs to be done behind the scenes I wanted. And it would get really uncomfortable for me towards the end of the trip, because the members that were joining us would stand up and thank us and give little speeches about what they learned and how impactful it was. And they would always go, well, we know that this is Rob's thing, but Kim is right there alongside him. And they tried to bring me into the limelight. And I'm like, no, not again. Don't do it.
Yeah, no, for sure. But speaking of, I feel like I feel like this is a good place to say this. The events that we're doing our last one in Cannes this summer.
Our last platinum event.
So if you've ever thought of doing it, we're moving on to doing other types of events. More to come on that later. So if you've thought of doing it, there's a link in the podcast description. You can jump on and fill out an application.
This will be it, baby.
And this will be it.
And we're going out big.
Here's what I would say that I think is really important. When you're defining lanes of who's going to do what, the one thing you didn't mention, you alluded to it, and you said you have to be okay with it. Here's the biggest part, and this may not be a woman's thing, but it certainly is a guy's thing, or can be. There's ego involved depending upon what the activity is. You know, if you're emptying the garbages in the house, there's not a lot of ego there. But if you are the one that's on stage, there's ego there, right? If you're the one that's leading an exercise at an event, there's ego there. And I think that you have to run it through the lens that Kim gave you, but I would also add one more lens to it, and it would be, do I have an ego tied to this somewhere? Because if you do, the old 70s saying, check your ego at the door, is appropriate here. We'll stay with the analogy of the network marketing thing. I would need to know that when I walked into a network marketing event and Kim is dominating the network marketing of our family, that I would know that it would be the Kim show when I was there. And I would need to check my ego at the door and say, this is her thing. I am there to support her, in the same way that she recognized that Rob, had this podcast that, ultimately the podcast came out of that frustration that we had that night. And that podcast then led into events, and this is something that's really important to him. So you made the decision to check your ego out at the door and say, no, I need to push him forward. I want to push him into the spotlight, and I want to stay behind because this is his thing. And I think your ability to be able to check your ego at the door only comes from you asking yourself, do I have an ego in this?
All right. So I'm going to wrap it back to where we got this idea, because we have some friends, right, that both want to play that front man role all the damn time. So what advice, if you had them in front of you and they knew we were talking about them, what advice would you give them?
Man, that's a tough one, because when you're competing for oxygen, there's a lot that's baked into that competition for oxygen. And I think that I don't know if this is going to be great advice, but the only advice that I have in me is to have an honest conversation about how to navigate it. Because like I said earlier, in this particular case, they are naturally extroverted. So an extrovert gets energy from being front and center. An extrovert, by definition, goes to the bar, strikes up a conversation with the person at the seat next to him and says, how was your day? And like the ability to get lost in the communication of that gives them energy. An introvert is the opposite, wants to put headphones in and not talk to the person. These two are extroverts. So they are, at the end of their long day, being stressed out with work and children and life, they want to tell whatever story they're telling, or they want to be center stage because they're energetically they need it. So it's almost like you're cutting off a life supply to one of them that isn't getting the energy that they need from the conversation. So the only thing that I can say in that case is to have some sensitivity around, hey, look, I love sharing stories. I know you love sharing stories, and sometimes I feel like the two of us are talking at the same time, and I can't get a word edge in. And I'm sure you feel the same way, that you're trying to say something and you can't get a word in edgewise. So, maybe we could ping pong this. Maybe we can go, okay, you take this one, I'll take the next one.
Or they could become a traveling road show.
Or you just take the show on the road. I don't have a good answer for that.
No, I think that is a good answer. Here's what I think it is. I think identifying and admitting, like everything else, once you go, oh shit, that's me, you can't be in the conversation the next time with the spouse and do the same thing without feeling like, fuck, I did it again. So I think acknowledging that you're a frontman personality, and maybe your spouse is too. And by the way, also, if you do find yourself as the lead dog often in your relationship, if you're like the Queen of England, maybe every once in a while, nudge your spouse to the front and make it about them, and vice versa, because that's in our relationship, Rob. You do that. You will, what's uncomfortable, I'm more introverted than you are. It is uncomfortable for me to be singled out or called out. But at the same time, sometimes it's nice to have you go, hey, did I tell you about a thing Kim did the other day? And kind of nudge me to the front, because then what do I want to do? I want to nudge you to the front. And like everything else, I feel like when you offer, I was going to say offer up your spouse, in my head it was like for a sacrificial lamb purpose, but when you push your spouse to the front sometimes and you make it about them and not you, then I think that favor will be returned as well. I think finding that balance, but I think the biggest thing is really knowing that you do it.
Yeah.
And identifying that you do it, and then trying to do it less.
I think so. And for those of you that, I'm going to nudge myself to the front here for a second. For those of you that are experiencing perhaps the writing on the wall, the nudge, the desire to start a new chapter in your life, you may want to check out a new podcast that I'm doing called, wait for it, Next Chapter. Just Google, YouTube. No,
it's in links in the bio, or links in the caption.
Links in the caption. I just said YouTube. I don't know why. I don't even know if I'm on YouTube. Okay, that's it, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. The hustle culture is going to encourage you to keep grinding away at work to accomplish your dreams. And I'm going to tell you to do the opposite. Break out from behind your desk and join us on our next Work Hard, Play Hard Platinum event in the crystal clear blue waters of the south of France. So Kim and I created this experience because we learn best by hanging out with bright, successful, interesting entrepreneurial couples in fascinating destinations around the world. So come join us for this platinum event in the south of France. It is limited to only 8 couples and is by application only. So get yourself out of the day-to-day operations of running your business. Meet some fantastic entrepreneurial couples. Get re-inspired to innovate your business again and enjoy the beauty of the south of France. Check out the link in the description to learn more.